Okay, so we're going to start with QGIS and we're going to do a new empty project. And I'm going to navigate to my folder where I've got the files stored. And I've got this file SRD in Kentucky modified that I sent you. And this is that map that was scanned in and we georeferenced it. And what I want to do is I want to digitize all of these points. So each of these points represents where somebody found southern red-bellied dace, and I want to convert them into a file that I can work with. So I need to make a new point shapefile, and so I'm going to come over here to the folder, and I'm going to right-click, New Shapefile, and I want to name this one, I think I'm going to name it SRD point, and the geometry type is a point. That's what I want. And the project is in the WGS 84 coordinate system, but we would rather work with UTMs, and so I'm going to go ahead and again choose this UTM Zone 16 North, and that's the coordinate system that I want to use for this shapefile. And if I wanted to add some fields like the number of fish caught or the date they were caught or who caught them or something, I could make new fields here and they would go into the attribute table. But I don't really have any of that information, so I don't need any new fields. You'll see here that it automatically has the ID field, and we'll see that come up here in a second. And we don't have any other fields, but we could add some fields. So I'm going to hit OK. And the new shapefile is created. And it's over here in my directory. So I'm going to go ahead and drag it into the map. And since my project is in the WGS 84 and this shapefile I just created is in this UTM 16, we've got to transform it, project it on the fly, whatever you want to call this, so that they can line up. And it always seems to pick the right one, so we don't need to mess with this. We're just going to accept what they tell us, and we're going to hit OK. And so now we look over here, and here's our point file. Of course, we don't see anything because we haven't created this file yet. Excuse me. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Toggle Editing. Or I could come up here to the pencil, and I can toggle editing. So now I can click that button, and now editing's off. And I click that button, and editing's back on. So there's usually more than one way to do something. When I turn on editing, here's my add point feature tool becomes active. And that's because I have this point file selected. And so I'm going to choose that. And I want to zoom in so I can see these better. And this picture doesn't look good because it's a low resolution photo, but I can tell where the dots go. So I'm going to click on that dot. And here we get the screen where we can fill in the fields. So here's that ID field that it automatically made. So we could give each one of these its own ID number. And if we had some other data, like how many fish were caught or who caught them or when they were caught, and we entered those fields, those could be here, and we could enter them as we create the file. But we don't have any extra information, and they don't really need an ID number, so I'm just going to, I can either click OK, or I can hit Return or Enter on my keyboard, and you can see that I put a point there. And so now I just go to each point and click on them and hit return to make that message go away. And when I need to move, I'm going to use the arrow keys on the keyboard. And I'm just going to kind of slide over, and I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to do this until every one of these points has been digitized. And so do the best you can. And if you look at somewhere like here, you know, you can see 3 points, but it looks like there's a 4th point in the middle. So, you know, again, wherever you think it looks like there's a point, you go ahead and make a point. And so continue doing that until you've got them all digitized. And as you go along, you don't want to lose all your hard work. So periodically you might want to come up here to the Save Layer Edits button and hit that. And that way you won't lose any of the work you've done. Now you might see some open circles. And these, I think, are for samples that were taken earlier or something. Don't worry about the open circles. Just digitize the closed circles. So once you have all the solid circles digitized, then come up here and choose to toggle off editing. And if you haven't saved, it will ask you when to save, and you definitely want to save. And now you've created a point shapefile of all those locations where we found this southern red-bellied dace. And if we turn off the map, you can see the points are still there. And that's exactly what we needed. So awesome. All right, now that we have the points digitized, we want to summarize them by county. So I sent you a file with the all the counties of Kentucky. And I got that here. I'm going to drag that into the map. And there you see all those counties. And we could drag it so the points show up on top if we wanted to, which is awesome. And so now we are going to do a spatial join. And we're going to have the software count up all the points in each county. And we're going to do that by going up here to Vector, then Analysis Tools, and then Count Points in Polygon. So we get this nice window. It's pretty easy to figure out. The polygons is going to be our county file. It's already figured out the points is our point shapefile. We don't need to really change anything else. It's going to make a new field called num points, and then put the count in that field for each county. Now we could go ahead and create a new shapefile, but I kind of like this, so we can just create a temporary layer. And so I'm going to leave it like this and hit run. And so now that it's done, I'm going to close this. So you see it created another polygon file, but this is just a temporary file. Now if we wanted to make this permanent, we could right click and export, save features as, and then save it as a shapefile, but I don't really need that. Now one thing I want to do is I want to right click, open its table, and there's a lot of stuff here, right? This is all the stuff that was in that county's shapefile. It's got all that same information, but now it's also got this new field, that num points. And so this is the number of sampling sites that was in each county. So there you go. We just automatically counted those up, and that's a spatial join. That's one way you can do a spatial join. Okay, cool. So now we can do things like we can recolor this map based upon those counts. And so now we've put those two shapefiles together, and we can demonstrate or show that data by changing the symbology. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this count file and go to properties. And I got a lot of properties here, but I want this symbology tab. And right now it's got a single symbol, so they're all the same color. We want to change this to graduated color. And there's nothing here because it doesn't know what to base the color scheme on. So we're going to go to this value field, and we're going to scroll down until we find that num points. So now we're going to colorize it based upon the number of sampling sites in each county. And there's all kinds of colors you can mess with here. You can do this drop down and get all these different colors. I'm going to do a random color ramp just for fun. So now I selected those colors, but we still don't have anything down here. What we got to do is we got to hit this classify button. And so you can determine how to make your classes, and you can change the classes. We messed with that before. We're not going to mess with that now. We're just going to hit classify. And you see we get these colors. We've got 5 classes. Okay, so in this example, our classes are weird. We've got 2 of them that are from 0 to 0. And then 0 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 15. And so we probably could play with this and get a better classification scheme, but I'm not interested in that right now. I'm just interested in making a map. So I'm happy with this. So I'm going to hit apply and then OK. And now you can see that we can start to see the patterns. And we can see where there were more sampling sites and where there are fewer sampling sites. So we've effectively combined these 2 data layers to make a new one. And that's the beauty of GIS. And don't forget that we started with a map that was just scanned out of a book. So we've created some really useful new data here. Okay, now that we've created our pretty map, we want to export it. We want to make a nice map that we can put into a document. First thing is we don't want this scanned map anymore. Let's go ahead and turn that off. And so we want to make this image look like the map that we want. And so we could just take a screenshot, and that works pretty well. Couple problems with the screenshot though. It's lower resolution, so if we needed a bigger picture for like a poster, that wouldn't work. And a screenshot doesn't have the essential elements of a map, which are the legend, the north arrow, and the scale bar. And so what we need to do is make a print layout and add those. So we're going to go over here to Project, New Print Layout, and we can give it a name like Kentucky Dace, or and because I did this already, it's saying title already exists. So I'm going to say Kentucky Dace 2, but you can either give it a name you want or leave it blank and it'll give it a random name. And so this is the print layout, and this is where we can make our map. And just like with our GIS, you have complete control and there's a million things you can do, and we're just not going to take the time to get into everything. You can play with this and figure a lot of that out yourself. First thing we need to do is we need to add a map layer. So we've got something to map. And so that's this button here. And so when I click it, then I can draw a rectangle. And there's my map. And so now I want to add a legend. We need to know what these colors represent. And so that's going to be this button here. I'm going to click and drag a box, and there I've got a legend. Now, this legend needs to be cleaned up a little bit. First off, it's got a lot of things in there that we don't really want in the legend. These are all items. that are in this map, and we don't need to include them in the legend. And so with this legend selected, I can click off of it, and I can click back on it. And when it's activated, if you come over here to item properties, you can see that's set to the legend, and you can change the properties. And then if I come over here and I click on the map, you can see that now this item properties is changed to the map, and you can play with the properties. So whatever you want to work on in this print layout, you just click on it, and then you can come over here and change its properties. So we can do a lot of things here. We're not going to mess with most of this stuff. And what I want to do is I want to come down here to legend items, because I want to remove some of these items. Now, if this auto update is checked, it won't let me remove those. So I'm going to uncheck that. And then I'm going to select like this layer. I don't want that in the legend. And when I select it, I can come down here and minus, and it's gone. Same here. Same here. And so now I've got just the layer that I want in this legend. And that's awesome. The only thing is it's named count, and I want something a little bit more descriptive than that. So I'm going to click on this, and then I can click on this button here to edit that. And when I do, it gives me a chance to change the name. And so I'm going to call it, sampling sites per county, or something along those lines. When I hit OK, now you see that that's updated. So now this legend contains the information that I want it to contain. And again, I totally get that this legend doesn't make any sense, and in real life I would not leave it like this, but we've got other fish to fry today. All right, next thing we need is a north arrow. And so we're going to come down here to insert an image, and I'm going to put it, maybe I'll put it here this time. Click and draw a box. And again, when I've got that selected, I come over here to item properties, and you see now it's set to picture. So now I can work on that picture. And you can do a lot of things to insert an image there, but what we're going to do is we're going to search directories. And when it does that, you see here's a bunch of images that came with QGIS. And so you can find whatever you want, but we want a north arrow. And so I'm going to choose this kind of Star Trek looking north arrow. And I'm going to add it. Now, I'm not going to add it yet though, because I want to come down here. Now I'm going to go to image rotation and sync it with the map. And so if the map got rotated, so would the north arrow, but the map should never get rotated. The map should always be north up, and your north arrow should always be up, but you just still have to indicate that. Okay, so at this point, I've got what I need, and I'm good. So I can just leave that there, and I could move that around and change the size if I wanted to. Finally, I need a scale bar, and that's this button here. Same deal, I click on it, drag, and it inserts a scale bar. And there's lots of ways that you could manipulate that. When it's selected, you come over here, you see it shows scale bar. The most important thing is we want things in kilometers. We want to do everything we can in metric. There's a million things you could play with here. We're not going to play with any of them. Okay, and so there we've got the essential things we need for a map, and we're ready to export this map. And again, you could take a screenshot, but the screenshot would have lower resolution. So what you want to do is come up here to layout and export as image. And so I've got several different types of images. JPEG is obviously the best one to work with here. And so I can change the file name, and I can get save. And now I can play with the settings for that JPEG. If I want the JPEG to be really big, like I'm going to put it on a poster, I can increase this resolution. And as I increase the resolution, you can see the page width and the page height changes. And so that's how I can get a bigger image if I know I'm going to need it. But if it's going to go into just a regular document or a report, 300 dpi is really good. And I hit save, and there you go. We're exporting, and there it's exported. Now, I've also talked about the difference between raster images and vector images. And we talked about the difference between rasters and vectors when we talk about GIS data, and it's a similar thing. You know, a raster is a group of cells, and they all have the same size, and they all contain a single number. Or in the case of an image, they all contain a single color. Or they contain a number, and that number indicates a color. Whereas a vector data has a definite shape, and a vector image has, you know, lines and curves that are drawn by math. And so it's two different ways to create an image. And so what we just created with that JPEG was a raster image, and most of the time you're going to work with raster images. But if you want a vector image, you can come up here and go to Layout, Export as SVG, and you get a warning that it may not work very well. So, you know, heed this warning if you'd like. But I'm coming up here, and my save as format only has the SVG choice. That's the only way to get a scalable vector graphic. That's what your SVG is for. So I'm going to save that. And again, you've got options you can play with, but I'm going to just accept the defaults. And so that's another way to export that image. So I want to try and show you why it's important to understand the difference between a raster graphic and a vector graphic. And so here's the folder where I've saved my two types of graphics that I just created. And you see I got these icons here. I want to look at the size and compare the size of the files. So I can come up here and go to View, and then Details. And if you look, here I've got the JPEG, which is our raster file, and it's 347 kilobytes. Same map that I exported as a vector file is nearly 7,000 kilobytes. And so that's why most of the graphics you're familiar with are raster graphics, because they can give you a picture that looks decent with a very small file size. And for a lot of things, that's plenty good, especially if you're just working on a computer, looking at it on your phone, and you don't need a very big image. But sometimes you're going to make a poster or something, and you want to scale this image up, and you want it to still look good. And a vector image will look a lot better. That's the trade-off. It's a bigger file size, but it also looks better. So let me just show you an example of this. So what I have here is just a blank PowerPoint. And what I've done is I've resized it. So if I come up here to Design, Slide Size, Custom, you can see that although it looks like a regular old PowerPoint, I've set it to be, you know, 4 foot wide by 3 foot tall. That's a typical size for a poster. And so what you're looking at is a very large slide that'll become a poster. And so I'm going to grab this JPEG and add it to the poster. And you can see that it, you know, that's a pretty good sized JPEG, but I'm putting it on a pretty good sized poster. So this is sort of like the native size of it. I'm going to go and grab that same map that I just made, but it's a vector file. And I'm going to add it to the PowerPoint too. And there you go. And you see that they both look about the same, you know, they're the same size and they both look about the same, right? So here's the thing. Let's say if this is a poster, I need this to be bigger. I need it to fill out the whole slide. So I'm going to take this JPEG, which is this one, and I'm going to drag it up here, and I'm going to enlarge it so that it fits on the poster. And you say, well, it's good. And it does look good because you're sort of looking at a computer monitor. But if you printed this, it would not look good. If we zoom in, and it'll take quite some zooming in because, you know, these JPEGs are very high resolution. But if I zoom way in, if you look here at these borders, see these artifacts? You see this pixelation? You can see that when you zoom in, it's not that great. And you're like, well, big deal. Look at what I was looking at it. But when you print it, it's going to look like this, and that's not very good. So I'm going to zoom back out. Now, here's another thing about the file size. You know, these days hard drives are big. We don't care that much about file size unless we're sending the files over the internet. But you got an old computer. I'm working at home. I got an old computer with an old video card, and you can see how laggy it is. That's, again, because of these big vector file. So I'm going to pull my JPEG down, and now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to use this file, which is the vector file. So I want it to take up most of the poster. And so, just as like before, it looks really good here on the computer monitor. And so I'm going to zoom in, just like I did before. And again, I don't know if you can tell, but it's, you know, quite laggy because of that big vector file and my old computer. But now look at these borders. Very clean, very nice. You don't see those artifacts. And that is the advantage of a vector file. And so when I print this, it will print like this, and it will look a lot better. So there you go. If you know you want a bigger file, go ahead and save it as a vector file that you can enlarge to any size, and it will still always look good. But 98% of the time, your raster is probably going to be good. There are graphics arts people out there who are probably losing their minds, but I'm a biologist, and I'm telling you from experience, that's how it is. All right. So if you got any other questions, let me know.